Okay.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this meeting, this regular board meeting of the North County Transit District for July 18 of 2019. I will ask our clerk of the board to call roll.
Thank you, sir. Jack Feller. Here. Tony Krantz.
Here.
John Franklin. Here. Paul McNamara. Here. Jim Desmond. Here. Dave Juker. Here. Joel Edson. Here. Sharon Jenkins. Priya Bhatt-Patel. Here.
Great, thank you. And if you'd all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Anthony Flores, clerk of the board, will now provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
Thank you, sir. In the event of emergency, I will dial 911. In the event of an evacuation, please do so using the stairs. Do not use the elevator. Once outside the building, please do not re-enter unless told to do so by emergency personnel. We have fire extinguishers on each floor of this building. We also have a portable defibrillator on hand in case of emergency. We also have staff on hand trained in CPR procedures. That concludes my safety brief, sir.
Thank you. And Anthony, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
Are there any public speakers for oral communications today?
I have none, sir.
All right. That brings us to the minutes for regular board meeting of last month, June 20, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? On a motion by Drucker and a second by Vice Chair Feller. We will now vote.
On the motion of Board Member Dave Juker, seconded by Board Vice Chair Jack Feller, to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting held on June 20th, 2019. Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda for action today. Any changes?
No, sir.
Pulled items, okay. I'd entertain a motion to approve consent items 1 through 10.
I just want to comment on 3.
Pardon me?
I wanted to make a comment on item 3. If you want to vote, that's fine. If you want to go ahead.
All right. Motion by Edson and second by Drucker.
Yeah.
And
make a comment. Just make a comment.
Push hard, John. Pick it up.
There you go.
On the motion of Board Member Joel Edson, seconded by Board Member Dave Juker, to approve consent items 1 through 10. Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
thank you. Jim, did you want to comment?
Yeah, and on item 3, this is page 7 of 41. I don't have I'm technically challenged, so I got the paper portion here. You get the 2 charts of the national transit ridership numbers, and then and NCTT numbers as well on these 2 charts. The charts are where they're laid out. The top one on national ridership is like on the left scale and the y-axis or whatever. There's only about 1.5 million, whereas you've got 14 million on the NCTD scale. So can we kind of make those so that, because it's kind of hard to look at one versus the other, because one looks very, very flat when depending on the scale. So if we could do them, I guess the national ridership scale to me looks more indicative of what's really happening, whereas the NCTD scale, I think it's not being untruthful, but it just shows it much flatter when it's presented this way. Well, no, don't play with them. Just make them the same, so that we can see what the as more of a comparison. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to other business items 11 and 12. We'll start with item 11, and Sean Lukeborough, Chief of Safety and Security, is going to review that.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board of Directors. Let's see if this works. All right, Anthony, you win.
This presentation is for Rail Safety Month, which is in September 2019. Since the board is dark in August, we do the presentation in July rather than doing it in September when Rail Safety Month is always almost complete. So we'll talk a little bit about what we do for rail safety every day here at NCTD, but again, we'll highlight it with national recognition of Rail Safety Month in September of 2019. Again, we're committed to this safety of the system through rail safety, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We do have staff that is on hand 24/7 to make sure that folks are safe while they operate our systems. We look at the coaster and sprinter for rail safety, specifically for trespassers, folks that ignoring or bypassing signals at grade crossings, as well as additional motorists, pedestrians, or folks on bicycles. As a statistical review for fiscal year 19, and this would be from July of 18 till June of this year, we had, there's the near misses, incidents of trespassers and strikes, and so I'm happy to say that those are all down for fiscal year 2019. So we had 157 near misses, that's down from 241, which is what we had in fiscal 18. We had 904 trespasser incidents or trespasser reports, that's down from 987 from the previous fiscal year. And unfortunately, we had 19 strikes, but that is down from 21 strikes in fiscal year 18. So there was decreases in all those categories, which is good, but there's still work to be done to make sure. I'd like to see all those zeros across the board, and we will continue to strive for that. Each September across the country is Rail Safety Month. Again, it's a year-round effort for us. It's a great opportunity to do outreach and education, not only for NCTD staff. We do partner with California Operation Lifesaver. So I do have a California Operation Lifesaver instructor that's been approved by them. He's gone out to several schools. We've done about a half dozen presentations as the school year closed, and we're going to pick it back up once school starts again in the fall. Also this year, we've partnered with one of the junior lifeguard programs. So we've gone out to one of the junior lifeguard programs and talked about rail safety with some of those young men and women that want to be lifeguards because they could be in a position of being a first responder soon. And it's a great target audience for us. So we're hoping to grow that. And if we can talk to more of those groups of kids, soon to be perhaps first responders, that's a great opportunity for us. We do support Rail Safe Operation. We do have the web banner, and then doing this presentation, asking for you as the board to approve a proclamation that September will be Rail Safety Month. We do have outreach efforts. Again, we do it at our major transit centers and some of our other stations throughout our different operating areas. Also had a tent at the fair this year where we also talked about rail safety with folks that wanted to come by. And again, reaching out to those schools is a great target audience to try to promote that rail safety early. We do have professional materials. We do have coasters that we give out to some of the local bars as well that basically says, you know, how alcohol can affect and watch out if you're walking around the rail. So we do have a lot of those coasters that we hand out. So we work with local businesses as well along the railroad to try to promote rail safety the best we can. As I alluded to, it's not a Rail Safety Month for NCTD. It's 365, 24/7. And I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce some of the staff that do it. A lot of the staff that we do have that support these opportunities are certainly behind the scenes. We do partner with major law enforcement agencies. We have the contract with the San Diego Sheriffs, as well as memorandums of understanding with Oceanside and Escondido. And we routinely work with these other police departments, as well as our partner railroads, such as Amtrak, Metrolink, and BNSF, and again, California Operation Lifesaver. As far as folks behind the scenes, this is Ryan Song. He's one of the control center techs. He works for me. He either works in the monitoring center at OTC or he works at the OCC. And what they do is really behind the scenes. They answer the phone calls for people that may have questions or security concerns, and they also monitor our cameras. So they're able to identify behaviors or things early where it may be a hazard, and we can get the appropriate responses needed, and overall providing safety for all of our customers wherever they are at stations or platforms or any of our modes. So again, just want to highlight some of the good work that Ryan and we do have 9 control center techs, and they're 24/7 again to make sure that we have the appropriate folks monitoring and make sure everybody's safe and somebody there to answer phone if somebody calls. In conclusion, our staff recommendation is that the Board of Directors adopts a proclamation recognizing September as the State of California Rail Safety Month. Pending any questions, that's all I have.
Thank you, Sean. Anthony, do we have any public speakers for this item?
No, sir.
Any board comments or questions? Board member Bhat Patel.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So I have a quick question in regards to mental health and suicide prevention. A lot of the examples I see here specifically are in regards to, it seems like cars, right? And I know you mentioned one for pedestrian, but in terms of if somebody's having a dilemma, do we have signs? I've noticed some signs, I know at least in Encinitas. What do we do around that?
So there is suicide hotline signs, and that's all down the San Diego corridor. So you'll see them all the way down green at the stations, as well as along various places of the right-of-way is one. The control center technicians too, actually, we send them to a course on sort of behavior recognition where they can identify folks that are in distress and perhaps need that additional help. So we send them with training to try to identify those folks that may need that additional help. As far as the strikes, the majority of those are trespasser strikes. Some of those are vehicles. And again, the reason they're there, whether intentional or not, the results are the same for us. Unfortunately, it's a disruption. It costs us for cleanup. It's certainly a loss of a life if it is a fatal incident to whoever that affects. So the results are the same why they're there. So our focus is on the education and prevention of trying to keep people off the tracks. But we do, again, the signs is one piece, and then the training that we do for some folks that monitor those cameras to make sure that they're aware of what to recognize and try to get it, be predictive rather than reactive, sort of our safety model, and try to get it before it becomes a significant incident.
I really appreciate that insight. I actually love that we have that, that we are actually training people to go out and make sure that they can see any signs of distress. So that's really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Board Member Jenkins?
I have a couple questions. On the numbers that you presented in the first slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Are those specifically more in certain areas? And then if you find you have an increase or activity going on in certain areas, do you do then more efforts in that particular area?
Absolutely. So these are predictive indicators. So wherever you have trespassers, you obviously have a higher frequency of people that are doing something they shouldn't along the tracks, and the same with near miss events. So those are predictive. So we do look at the statistics monthly. You receive quarterly reports that have these statistics, and then we focus our efforts in that area, either with law enforcement, with enforcement activities, or if we can have an outreach at a school. Let's say there's a specific location where maybe there's some folks crossing routinely, or we know it's a business that people are going to. We will reach out to that, whatever that organization is, and talk to them and say, hey, we've seen an increase of trespassing at this location. Is there something that we can do either education-wise to mitigate that? So we do look at the data and we do focus our efforts based on what the data is telling us.
Okay. And then when you talked about outreach to the schools,
Yes.
do you go out to schools that are specifically near the track? Like I'm thinking in San Marcos Middle School is right there.
We tend to
there's-
focus on the schools that are close in proximity to the
Okay.
railroads, and we work with California Operation Lifesaver. Certain schools do reach out,
Right.
and then if an employee has some sort of relation with the teacher or the school, we will go out. But generally, we are working both along the Escondido and San Diego subdivision, schools within, I don't know, probably 5 miles of the tracks where the population of the student base could be in and around the railroad tracks. So that's where we tend to have our focus for those schools.
Okay. Thank you.
Vice Chair Philip?
So the suicide prevention signs go out the Sprinter too, not just south on.
They were procured by Amtrak. So based on the Amtrak service, they were specifically requested to be put on the San Diego subdivision. So the current ones that we have are strictly on the San Diego subdivision. We are looking to expand that from the agency perspective to put additional signs on the Sprinter side.
What's a percentage of the 904 trespassers? I mean, you don't have somebody, just patrolling a sector up and down for,
Percentage, so that's 904 trespassing reports. The actual number of trespassers is significantly more. So that's a number of reports we receive. As far as, are you asking a breakdown of coaster versus Sprinter? Is that what you're looking for?
both actually, because that's where we should be able to recoup some of the money is for these trespassers with their fines.
Yes. We have that data, and we have the majority of the trespassing is along the San Diego subdivision. So geography matters, where people are trying to go and why they trespass. But we still do have trespassing on the Sprinter, but it is significantly less than what we see typically on the coaster side. But we do have the data, and we sort of have the targeted areas on where those trespassers are. And in fact, we have a trespasser mitigation study that just closed for bid, and we're going to have a firm come out and see what enhanced trespasser mitigation measures we can do to try to help reduce some of that in some of our focused areas. So I have specific data. If you have a specific location or something,
No,
I can certainly provide that.
nothing specific. I just think that 904, considering the possibility of several thousand trespassers.
Well, that probably is several thousand trespassers. Again, just 900 reports.
Yeah, and
but still-
they weren't given citations on all of those.
No, that is correct. Yeah, that is not number of citations. So that's typically reports that we see from the train crews or staff that is out working along the right of way, for example. That's how they come in. It could be staff doing an inspection and sees it. So typically those are just reports that can be received in the Operations Control Center from any source. But the train crews themselves are typically our number one reporters because they're zipping back and forth on the line every day.
All I'm saying and asking is if we enforce the trespassing.
Yes, which we
A
do.
little high, I mean, at a higher level, it probably pays for itself.
It does not.
Board Member Edson?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. And also, I did not understand before that the signage for suicide prevention was only on the San Diego subdivision.
That's correct.
So with that in mind, I would be inclined to ask that and encourage staff to expedite signage on the Escondido subdivision for
Absolutely.
suicide prevention as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Any other questions, comments? All right, we do have a proclamation that we need to adopt officially, so I would entertain a motion to adopt that proclamation. Board Member Edson, seconded by Board Member Jenkins.
On the motion of Board Member Joel Edson, seconded by Board Member Sharon Jenkins to approve agenda item number 11, motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
John. Moving on to item number 12, to authorize the executive director to negotiate and execute a supplemental agreement for positive train control maintenance and support services. Mr. Rowe.
Good afternoon. So some of you guys haven't gone through my PTC presentations in the past, so we figured we'd do a little bit of a background on PTC before we got into this. So the PTC mandate, there was two notable incidences that happened that sort of launched us into positive train control. So in 2005, there was a train crew who left a switch in dark territory open. So it meant it was lined for a spur track where they tied up their train. They left, realized it later, but before they were able to get back there, train crashed in, took that turnout and crashed into the rear of another train. Major incident there. And then and that was South Carolina. Another one closer to home in Chatsworth, 2008, where a engineer was texting and ran through a red signal and ended up crashing head on to a freight train, caused 25 deaths at that location. So that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back on PTC, something Congress has been looking at. So the Rail Safety Improvement Act of 2008 mandated positive train control to be installed by the end of 2015 on all Class 1 main lines that carried over 5 million gross annual tons. So heavy lines or carried poison by inhalation or toxic by inhalation of certain quantities. So hazardous material, the real bad kind, or any railroad main lines that carry scheduled passenger intercity, so Amtrak trains or commuter operations. So that's where we fall into. Congress extended the deadline to 2018 and then allowed for an extension to 2020 if certain conditions were met. NCTD did meet the 2018 deadline, and we do have positive train control installed on our San Diego subdivision, which is Orange County to San Diego. So what is PTC? It's good to just follow Sean's here. So PTC does 4 things: prevents train-to-train collisions, derailments caused by exceeding track speeds, derailments by misaligned switches, or unauthorized incursions into work zones. So that's the 4 principles of PTC, and that's what it does. So if there's a vehicle on the tracks, if there's a trespasser on the tracks, PTC does not know that and doesn't take that into account. It's just these 4 items that PTC does. Quick little overview of PTC. So PTC is a system of systems. So there's many independent, complicated systems that all need to work seamlessly together. So we have a communications network, a onboard segment, locomotive segment, a back office segment, wayside segment. All of these different segments need to work together. And then to expand upon that is they all need to work with all the other tenant railroads. So every railroad that operates on our territory has to have the same type of equipment. The railroads are notorious for not doing the same thing. So the old joke is that the gauge of the tracks and the height of the coupler is the only thing the railroads agree on, and they do everything different beyond that. So PTC required us all to come together and do implement the same kind of technology. Industry challenges. So funding, PTC's being installed on 60,000 miles of railroad across the nation and is costing upwards of $14 billion to be installed. Technology, there is no commercial off-the-shelf technology. Every implementation of PTC, as small as us or as big as Union Pacific or BNSF, it's all a design, different design for all of those systems. Resource, it's a highly complex technology. There's a very small pool of people that are able to do PTC, understand PTC, and then interoperability. This is what I was talking about with our tenants. Our system has to work between us, Amtrak, Metrolink, BNSF, and our short line. So BNSF operates, throughout the Western United States. They touch the other class ones. So it's not a lot of separation between us and a railroad in Florida. It's, 3 degrees of separation, they make a change. And so it all has to work together there. Funding, so NCTD was lucky. We were able to secure $87 million back in 2011 timeframe to be able to pay for PTC. And so here's sort of a list of our funding we received for it. And you'll see most of it is federal and state funding that we did receive, a small portion of local funding. And then I know it's a little bit of an eye chart here with the expense allocation, but this is to show the PTC program was a lot more than just our vendor integrator. We installed fiber along the corridor to every one of our wayside signal locations, did some other additional upgrades, implemented a dispatch system before PTC. NCTD did not dispatch the San Diego sub. As part of this, we did install a new dispatch system capable of operating PTC and took in dispatching through NCTD's contractors. Previously, Metrolink had dispatched the San Diego subdivision. So milestones. So with the contract with Herzog Technologies, they were our vendor integrator for PTC. So we selected them in 2011 to be our vendor integrator. It was a 3-phase project. So phase 1 was development of the PTC system. And so they did the research that this is kind of the design portion of the sort of design build aspect. Phase 2 was procurement, installation, and testing. And so that completed the end of last year. And phase 3 is maintenance. So again, we were one of the 4 railroads in the nation to meet the December 31st, 2018 deadline. And by meet the deadline, that means not only is NCTD operating PTC, but our tenant railroads are operating PTC on us as well. So where, say, BNSF is running PTC on all of its subdivisions, not all of its tenants are running PTC. So maintenance requirements. So there was part of the original contract with HTI did have a maintenance component in it, but there has been many changes to PTC since 2010 when that scope was written. So changes the interoperable train control messaging, hardware and software. That's sort of the backbone of PTC being able to talk to each other. That was not contemplated in the original portion of it. Some FRA reporting requirements were not contemplated part of that. Increased base stations for uninterrupted communication. So we had made there was required changes for that over the period of time that increased the requirements of maintenance. And then there's a limited vendor competition. There's not many people who know how to do PTC and are able to do PTC. So it's a small pool available. Some of the cost drivers, reporting requirements, PTC, FRA is very involved with PTC. So we need to maintain it in requirements with our safety plan that was submitted. So this does have a lot of reporting, and reporting is time, gathering data, presenting it to the FRA. Software, the software is back to that previous picture. Every one of those systems has software on it. The onboard software for one has gone through multiple updates. It gets changed every couple months. They find an issue or create an enhancement, and that requires a lot of testing to be able to move to new software revisions. And then changes to what we call the subdivision file. So anytime there's a capital construction project that moves any element, that subdiv file needs to be changed and updated. And so it's quite a bit of work of maintaining that. And then a PTC help desk, another thing not envisioned in the original maintenance. And so what we're looking to have is a help desk at our OCC where they'll be there able to troubleshoot real time. So if a train has an issue with PTC, they'll be able to get into it and hopefully resolve it quickly. And this may be a Amtrak train that's having trouble initializing on Metrolink, and it requires a lot of working through our back office servers, contacting their servers to find out what the issues were and what we can do to resolve them and run the train successfully with PTC. That is our ultimate hope, is to run PTC on every train on the territory, because we want the safety benefit of PTC on all of those trains. So here's a couple pictures for those who haven't seen it. So the train management computer, that is one of our cab cars. So that screen in the middle is the PTC screen. So that's where it shows, and it'll provide a display of the grade of the track, the layout, and provide the warning distance and braking distance for the train. The middle is servers. PTC is a computer heavy function. So we have a large data center back in our Escondido OCC where dispatch is served out of. And so this is actually just a portion of our servers at our test facility. And then we have a PTC network. So we have communication towers, radio towers, 19 radio towers, and we have fiber running to all of our wayside equipment, and all of our stuff runs on fiber. And by doing that, it allows for redundant communications. So if one base station tower goes down, we are able to work off of a separate base station tower. And if the fiber is cut, we do have redundant rings for PTC to be able to keep PTC up and running. And all of these servers and networks and the computers need to be maintained. Maintenance options. So the Bombardier maintenance agreement that we entered into in 2016 was awarded in December of 2015, had a portion of PTC. The implementation of PTC was not complete at that time. And then Bombardier has no prior experience maintaining PTC. Turnkey contract with Wabtec. So Wabtec is the main provider of the PTC hardware. So this onboard computer in the middle, that is a Wabtec product. A lot of the servers are Wabtec products. And so Wabtec's heavily involved. There's still an additional 37 railroads that need to meet the PTC mandate. And that's a big focus of their resources, is completing that. And then we have HTI. So the phase 3 of the maintenance, they implemented our system. So it's not a complete Wabtec system. The ITCM is not a Wabtec product. That was custom built for our system, modified for our system. And the scope of work under that original agreement requires modification. So that's what we're looking to do here, is to modify our maintenance agreement in the existing contract for these additional services and changes that had happened. So staff recommends that we go with HTI to provide this management maintenance of the system. And so we are still negotiating some final points of the contract, but it'll be a base 5-year contract with a 5-year option. They'll manage our circuits, manage the back office server, maintaining the interoperability of our PTC system, reporting. And so again, negotiating is hosting and cost. Right now, hosting would mean that they would host our PTC system on their servers. Our servers are getting near the end of our useful life. And so we would either need to replace our servers or we can go to their system. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So options for the hosted system versus an on-site system. So it maybe seems a little different, but the cost for maintaining a system that we own and have the equipment is a little over 5.3 million a year. The one thing that the benefit of us having the system is independence. It's our system. We could change vendors relatively easy if there's vendors available to change. The annual cost for a hosted service is about 4.6 million a year. The leverage there is a shared infrastructure. So it requires some less people here, and they have services where it's multiple railroads that they are hosting. So that's kind of spread across those. Another difference with with the hosted system, it is a redundant system, class 3 data centers with multiple redundant locations, 2 locations. Right now, we currently have 1 location. If we did stay with a independent system, we would need to put a DR site, a disaster recovery site, to have geographical difference, so in case there was an issue. It is a fixed fee contract, so we are negotiating that fixed fee on profit and overhead, and productivity cost reduction. So as part of this is mainly a labor agreement, and so what we are looking to do is after the first 12 months, we are going to review the people, the staffing, what we need, and we will refine the structure and scope for technology, any optimizations or reporting that we can do that won't affect the safety of the system. So anything we can do to maybe streamline some reporting, create some tools, it's a shared benefit, and we'll work on those cost reductions. So cost breakdown, this is kind of an eye chart here with the pie chart, but this shows the different portions of PTC maintenance costs. And one of the portions here is Wabtec as a subcontractor. They eat up a big chunk of this. So no matter who you go to, you end up having to use the OEM as a subcontractor on or a prime contractor on portion of these items. So, and then there's circuit costs. There's a lot of telecommunications costs associated. One of the things with going with hosting is we eliminate a good portion of those telecom circuits. Instead of us having circuits to multiple different railroads, we'll have a circuit to their network, and they have the network circuits. So the PTC budget impact, it is definitely, this is a big hit for PTC. I think we're going down the road of its PTC project, but PTC is not a project. It's a lifelong commitment. And so it has a heavy cost. And so as part of that, so for this first FY 2020, we'll be using that PTC funding that we already have to pay for this maintenance. We have the agreement to be able to do that. We are going to leverage our tenants that operate on us. So the portion of the PTC that is should be borne by all because they're used by all. We will share that with our tenants, Amtrak, BNSF, and Metrolink on a basically a per mile basis. So the onboard, say, maintenance, that's an NCTD cost, but the waysides and the radios, we are looking to share that with them. And then this is a, the commuter rail industry as a whole, this is a big budget impact. You'll see, $5+ million for a small agency is a big chunk for something that nobody's going to see. That's the one thing with PTC. It's a great safety enhancement, but it's something that nobody's going to see. It's not a new double track project. It's not a new bridge. You don't get to go do a fancy ribbon cutting. Part of the problem with seeing PTC. So I won't read all this, but we recommend that the board of directors authorize the executive director to negotiate and execute supplemental agreement number 14 with Herzog Technologies. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public speakers for this item? All right, board comment questions. I'll start with Board Member Druker.
So the recommendation is that we use a hosting rather than our own at this point?
That's correct. That's what we're looking into final negotiating to seeing that.
We're going to look at both of those options. Obviously, we can see numbers, but we're going to finalize the negotiations and make a final decision about that.
So my comment would be, you know, this is like almost bus drivers and train operators. This is something that is not within our expertise, and it sure makes sense to have somebody else work on this rather than have our own servers, employees, et cetera. This creates a whole lot, needs a whole lot of expertise.
And let me address a little bit of that, because part of the fact PTC is new to the industry, and the cost is high right now. And as I've spoken with other CEOs, our numbers are directly in alignment with every single CEO in proportion to the size of railroads. So Metrolink's a few times bigger than us, and theirs is about 14 million per year. But part of what the industry is going to have to do is spend some time to really learn and understand this technology. Right now, because there is so limited competition, you can't really establish a basis for the pricing. And so I hear what you're saying, but we're going to have to take a step-by-step approach to this to make sure that we don't find ourselves in a position of not being able to capture some benefits where we maybe can source some of this work in-house. Our IT staff, I'd put them up against anyone. We have not brought them into the PTC project yet to see if they can bring some efficiencies to bear. But it would be a mistake for the industry not to try to be more independent on this project, given that you have a couple of vendors driving the price for both the implementation and the maintenance of the system. You got to bring more competition to the table.
Board Member Edson?
Yes, I had a couple of questions. So in the staff report, it talks about a previously implemented service contract. Was that with HTI or is that the Bombardier?
So Bombardier is the service contract.
Okay, so what was the amount of the service portion? And if that was 5 years, has that 5 years now expired?
So Bombardier was a 7-year contract with the 3-year. And so that potentially may be talking about the HTI contract. Bombardier, I don't have the full cost of the Bombardier. It was kind of intermixed with our Signal and PTC and
the long and short of it. So the contract with Herzog, who was the vendor integrator, the implementer for it, included an option for maintenance. And so that was one opportunity that we could look at, and we looked at that. We also looked at a contract with Wabtec, who's the original equipment manufacturer of the system. And then we also looked at Bombardier because we had included the scope or the thought process of maintaining PTC. But at the time that we awarded the contract to Bombardier, there were still tons of unknowns about Positive Train Control. And as we started looking at it and looking at what Bombardier proposed, it was woefully insufficient in terms of actual dollars that you would have to pay to the vendor. And then at the same time, Bombardier does not have any experience whatsoever in terms of maintaining this type of system. So we considered all of those factors in terms of making a decision about who should maintain the system. Wabtec, one would say, yeah, go with the original equipment manufacturer. They're struggling, as Eric laid out, because they have a ton of other railroads that need to actually implement PTC, and getting them to be able to provide the resources on site is tight at this point, and their price is probably more expensive than the price that we're going to pay with HTI. So we considered all of those factors in terms of making a decision about where we were going to go.
I kind of read that in the staff report, especially about Bombardier not really being up to speed and able and capable of doing the maintenance that we needed. But my question is more at the financial end. If Bombardier if we are under contract with Bombardier, like for not to exceed to perform these services, is there money sitting?
Oh,
There's this 5.140.
oh, yes. So I'll give you the example where you're going. So we could clearly identify, I think, about $23,000 a month that was associated with PTC materials, and they may have used that for both materials and a subcontract with Wabtec for maintenance. If you do 23 times 12, you get to $400 and something thousand a year. But the contract that we negotiated, the contract that's been negotiated with Wabtec is 1.2 million alone. So the bottom line of it is whatever dollars that we have left in the contract with Bombardier that are directly attributable to Positive Train Control for services we're not going to use, we're going to de-scope those dollars from that contract
Okay, so those would then go toward future.
towards the maintenance.
Okay. And the new chargers that are coming online, are they, I believe I've asked this
They're
question
coming
before,
with
but it was,
PTC.
yeah, it was before this board came on, or the new members. So I think that that's probably an important thing to talk about. One of the things that I saw in, or that was mentioned by Eric with the nice pie charts with hosted and not hosted, it's a fixed fee. I think that you mentioned that that's a fixed fee, but the staff report says that 4.6 per year, page, these aren't numbered, so page 2 of the staff report, I'd say, subject to escalation. So
the fixed fee portion is the profit and overhead.
okay,
And so as opposed to it being a percentage of the contract, it's a fixed fee. And then all of our contracts have a escalation clause. So up to 3%, not exceeding CPI.
Just for your edification, the reason that we did that is because we are really trying to incentivize the reduction of the costs associated with this contract. Because if you look at the labor, I think there's about 13 specified positions, 13 or so specified positions. And if you relate that to your direct fee, then the contractor actually has less incentive to reduce the staffing associated with the positions. And so our focus is to drive down the costs one by one, position by position, so that we could get to the best price that we can get to while maintaining the integrity of the system. That's why we made that adjustment.
okay, thank you.
Is there a way to approach this maintenance issue from a more regional point of view, instead of having MetroLink have their contract and us have ours, and et cetera, et cetera? Is there a way that we can get the administrative and the computer stuff that is somewhat consolidated, and then have the personnel that would come out and check lines and do preventive maintenance?
We're gonna look at all opportunities as part of that business improvement strategy study that we intend to undertake.
Thank you. Board Member Jenkins?
Question on the, so we received about $87 million towards the implementation, and I didn't add this up, but what approximately was our expense to get to the point of implementation?
Fairly close to the 87 with the maintenance option.
Okay, okay.
So yeah, we plan to spend all of our grant money on it.
Okay, and then since this is mandated, are there any funds that they sent along with this to us?
Well, so as an industry, no,
Okay.
but we did receive quite a bit of federal funding from the FRA for our project. So one of the things the agency did was we were an early sort of adopter. A lot of agencies were pushing back on PTC. We can't do this. There's no way. And the board was able to receive some funding early, and so we were able to fully fund this. And as you see, most of this is state and federal funding for our project.
Okay.
And I think Board Member Jenkins, let me share. The last couple of days, I've been in DC, and we had a group of us were meeting with both the FRA and at Federal Railroad Administration and the Federal Transit Administration to specifically discuss maintenance costs and needs. Right now, the maintenance costs are eligible under the FTA program. as preventative maintenance or capital, depending on what activity we're going to perform. But I think they all understood this is a pie discussion, because if you don't grow the pie, all you're doing is making the slices of the pie smaller. And so what we're committed to do is we're going to try to provide them language as they begin working on reauthorization for the transportation bill to be able to direct money to the commuter rail agencies to help offset the cost of implementing positive train control.
Okay. Good.
Board-
Thank you.
Board Member Franklin.
I just wanted to point out that whether or not we're going to use their shared hosting system or not, I don't think it makes sense in today's computing environment to be hosting servers on our own anymore. We have to pay people to maintain them. We don't have redundancy without building our own redundancy when we outsource stuff. And I hope you're smiling. I hope we're already doing a lot of this service. We're just finally starting to do it at Vista. When I was a new councilman 5 years ago, I walked in, big server room, and I said, when are we going to outsource all this? We can't get the same pricing on servers that Amazon can get. They buy their equipment cheaper, they maintain it cheaper. We pay somebody to sit 365, wait for it to break, versus sharing those services doesn't make sense. So whether you share through that shared hosting system or not, I hope we're not going to build our own computing systems in Escondido just for the pride of saying that we are maintaining them ourselves and we have great people. There's just too great of an efficiency to be achieved in those shared, whether it's PTC system or our other computing systems. I just want to throw that out there and hope we're moving that direction.
Vice Chair Feller.
Thanks, Tony. My question's along the same line. We have, I heard you say our servers are running short on life. And if we add something like this to it, I didn't quite get what was clear, the best approach if we have to replace servers already.
So let me just address this, because we're still in the middle of trying to finalize negotiations.
Okay.
So what the board needs to be confident at the end is that we're going to make the right financial and operational and maintenance decision for the district. So there are things it would not be good to discuss as part of this, but at the end, we have a history of being able to make the right financial decision to give the district the benefits that it needs. That we can see math, we can see numbers, we can see what's lower, what's higher, but there are negotiations that need to take place that will be final determinative, because you may look at something in a snapshot of 1 year versus long-term costs, and you have to look at the long-term costs before we make a final decision. We'll report back on where the final negotiations end, but trust me, at the end, it is all about what's in the best interest of the district, not 1 year, but long-term.
Thank you. I'm really talking out of my hat here because I don't even have a computer at home, but I don't know how much servers cost. And are we going to have to replace them if we do this hosted? Okay, never mind.
Board Member Desmond.
I'll move to approve the item.
Motion approved by Desmond, seconded by Edson. We can vote.
Nobody's just showing up.
We got ahead of Anthony. He's like, whoa.
On the motion of Board Member Joel Edson, or Jim Desmond, sorry, second by Board Member Joel Edson to approve agenda item number 12. Motion passes with all board members present voting yes.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on to informational item number 13, and Mr. Bruce Smith, the principal engineer at Sandag, is going to give us an update on the Sandag work in the low sand corridor.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to be back at my old home. Right, lots happened on the low sand since our last update. Trying to figure out the technology. We've got many active projects at the moment, probably more than we've ever had on our corridor. So we've got 5 projects in construction, and just to summarize, when those projects are finished, then we'll be in a position to be able to run more trains at a more frequent service interval, which was one of the Transnet promises. So by fall next year, the double track will be in place to allow NCT to be operating, trains at half-an-hour intervals during peak and maybe 1 hour off peak, whatever the service planners decide is appropriate. But my job of getting the double track there will be, for that phase of service increase, will be done by next year. We have one project in bidding, the Del Mar Bluffs Stabilisation Project, and we've got 6 projects in final design, and this is part of Sandeg's strategy. We want to have a bench of projects ready so that when the next recession comes along, we can be competitive getting federal and state money to build those projects. And then there are several projects in planning. And the last thing I want to look at today is the top 10 future projects that we've agreed with NCTD, what we think those projects will cost and how long it will take to put them in place. As you can see, we're probably at the busiest we'll ever be on this corridor in terms of projects in construction or in planning. But as you can see on that chart, all the lines on the right side that are faint, they're projects that are planned and we're working on, but we don't have the funding for construction. So they're the projects that we need to start trying to be competitive and get construction funds for. This is where we've come. Back in 2000, when I joined NCTD, we had about 16 miles of double track. Now we're up over 40 miles of double track. And now we'll look at the projects in construction. Poinsettia, we're at 62% progress on construction to build the new underpass. This photo shows that 3/4 of the underpass was constructed when that photo was taken. I went there today and had a look, and the underpass structure has been completed. But obviously the pathways and the ramps are still to be done. San Leje Lagoon project, we're now doing punch list work on this project. It's open to the public. That's a photo showing the double track on the left and the Encinitas-Cardiff Coastal Rail Trail on the right. In May, we had ribbon cutting for Chesterfield Drive crossing, San Leje double track and the Coastal Rail Trail. And that's a photo just showing the Chesterfield Drive grade crossing, as well as double tracking the crossing. We worked with the city. They contributed to putting a quiet zone in at Chesterfield. So now we have a quiet crossing, which has everyone in Encinitas very happy. Further down on the Warrington Marina double track, the main work that's happened there in the last quarter is the construction of the Midcoast flyover. And this is a photo of one of the beams being lifted in. And this is a photo of the coaster going under the flyover where the trolleys will eventually go over the top to the Midcoast. And this is an aerial view of that flyover. So it's quite a substantial piece of work the Midcoast team has put in over the Warrington Marina double track. But as you can see, all the beams are in, and they're now working on casting the deck. Down at San Diego River, the second rail bridge is completed, and the teams are working on the trolley bridge. As I said, Del Mar 4 is out to bid. We're expecting bids on August the 1st, so fingers crossed. We had pre-bid meeting yesterday. We got quite a good number of contractors turned up. They did express a concern that the budget was low, but we'll have to wait and see when the price comes in. Now, the projects we've got in final design that we're getting ready for construction over the next 10 years. We've got San Onofre to Pulgas Phase 2 on Camp Pendleton. Again, this project is funded for construction, but we're waiting for the Navy. The Navy's building the Red Beach Bridge. Is a photo of their work. They've done the piling and they're doing the abutments of that bridge across Las Flores Creek. As soon as they're finished, we will start the double track project. And then the next 3 projects, we've got Eastbrook to Shell on San Luis Rey River. We've got Carlsbad double track. Actually, we're doing it. That project is on hold for a trench study we're doing with the city of Carlsbad. Battersea Lagoon, we're also in final design and permitting. That's probably the next project we will build after San Onofre to Pulgas because it's part of the North Coast Corridor. And to comply with the KEO legislation, we have to be progressing the railroad at the same time as we're progressing the freeway. Again, San Dieguito, we have this project fully permitted. We're just doing final design of the fairgrounds platform and that double track. Again, that's replacing a 1,000-foot long bridge that's 100 years old. That's in dire need of replacement. Trinidad de Miramar Phase 2, also in final design and permitting. Another a thing that we also need to look at is we've got, I think it's about 8 old bridges on the corridor. There's 4 in Rose Canyon and 4 up in the north of Camp Pendleton that need to be replaced in the next 10 years. This bridge is 100 years old. So we're appealing to Matt to help us fund the construction of that bridge. It's in design at the moment.
This bridge project, because I think we have about $5 million on this project now. But if we don't find a way to fund this project before the Midcoast contractor demobilizes, the cost for this project could be 50% more expensive. And so we're trying to work through to get final pricing from the vendor to get this project done before that Midcoast project wraps up.
Yeah, and this project has some risk. There's a large trunk sewer runs underneath this bridge. So that limits some of the design options. And then we've got several projects in planning. First one is Carlsbad Village Trench. Linda is working with Carlsbad Village, and they're looking at 2 alternatives for a trench. One from the Coast Highway Bridge to the north, running right down to Agua Hidiona Lagoon. And the shorter trench is 6,000 feet long, and that runs down to near Tamarack. So that alternative analysis study is underway at the moment. As you can see, it's expensive to do trenches, $200 to $350 million. But we'll continue doing the study and we'll find out what's the best solution. This is typically what the trench would look like. Would have 2 tracks in it and also access for emergency vehicles. The reason the trench has got vertical sides here is because you're in a heavily built up area, you don't want to be building a trench like we did in Solana Beach, because you have to end up taking houses and properties. So in order to keep the trench in the right of way, it's built vertically with vertical walls. Here's a similar trench that was built in the Alameda corridor. The Carlsbad Trench would probably look something like this. Another project we have in Encinitas that is just starting up. The city has completed the design of this undercrossing at El Portal. The city's asked us to do the construction for them. So we're working on the memorandum of understanding, and we'll be taking this item to our transportation committee tomorrow for them to consider recommending it to our board that we construct the project for Encinitas. It's being funded with an active transportation grant and also with from the city's general fund. We get down to Del Mar 5 in the state budget. Senator Atkins has earmarked $6.1 million for us to begin the work on Del Mar Bluffs 5. So this graphic shows where we put the piles in Del Mar Bluffs 2 and 3, shown in green and yellow. As the bluff retreats and the sea works its way at the foot of the bluff, the areas in blue have been identified as the next most likely areas that do need piling reinforcement. And if we have an earthquake like the Ridgecrest earthquake on the Rose Canyon Fault, there's a possibility of one of those areas having a deep-seated slide. So that's why we'll be looking at piling in the blue areas as part of Del Mar 5. Again, another part of Del Mar Bluffs 5 is we're going to do a complete new look at the bluffs. We'll be working with the Scripps Institute of Oceanography and looking at their LiDAR surveys. And we'll be looking at what needs to be done to get us to 2050. We estimate it will cost about $24 million this phase. Another project ideas in Del Mar, we had a consultant come forward and propose a trench through the Del Mar Bluffs. And this is a summary of the slides we presented to our transportation committee recently. A similar idea to the trench in Carlsbad. You need about a 55 feet wide trench that you can have emergency vehicles and 2 trains in. It would require tiebacks under some of the houses. It would also require bluff tow protection to stop the waves getting at the trench and undermining it. We could put pedestrian crossings in and ramps down to the beach. We could also put linear parks on sections of this trench. Have quite a nice visual effect from that rendering. So that's something to think about as we go forward in Del Mar. And just to give an overview of some of the different proposals that we have in Del Mar. So we've spent $80 million on the bluffs to date. We're looking to spend another 24 on Project 5 and maybe 65 on 6. The trench is estimated to 300, 400 million. As well as doing the trench, if we do the trench, we double track Los Penasquitos Lagoon. It's not currently a project in our San Diego Forward, but it costs us 70 odd million to go across San Alejo Lagoon. That's about twice as long. So it'd be a considerable cost to double track over the lagoon. And then as we did in the North Coast Corridor, we had to restore the San Alejo Lagoon. So quite likely we'd have to do a restoration project in Penasquitos if we do the trench and the double track. And then of course we've got the tunnel, quite a large cost. I don't know, Matt, whether you wanted to say anything about this slide. No, okay. So we've had several discussions with Matt and his team about what do we need to do in the future. And so we've taken the top 10 projects, made a list. These are projects we feel that need to come into the early action program. At the moment, they're in various states of some are in design, some are in planning. But we've got continuing the bluff stabilization as our highest priority. Once we finish the projects that are now in construction, we made a promise to the voters to improve the service on the coaster. So and the regional plan has, I think, 3 train sets in it. We need 2 train sets in the next couple of years and another train set probably by 2035. We've got 8 wooden bridges in San Onofre and Rose Canyon that need to be replaced. Many of these bridges are 100 years old, and as a state of good repair, they need to be replaced. And then we've got the 4 double track projects, which are needed for the next service increase would be in 2030 timeframe. And of course, we've got La Costa to Encinitas. We haven't even done the design on that project. And we've always had the convention center platform. Probably a good time to do that would be when the convention center gets expanded. The next obvious question is, well, what will this cost? So this is an order of magnitude estimate for what these projects will cost. We're looking at 500 million for the double track projects. We've got 8 bridges at about 10 million a bridge, is about 80 million, 76. Del Mar Bluffs, we're looking at 83. 2 train sets within the next 3 years, and then another one you'll see out FY 31 to 35. And then we've got the convention center station. So we're looking at $800 million to get to the next stage of readiness for the next service increase that would be in FY 30 to 35 period. That's it, really. That's the story. That's where we've come. This is where we're going to go. So, sorry?
Are you going to stick to that story?
Yeah, I mean, that's the end of the presentation. But I mean, this is really the discussion point this is the Los Ann corridor, and this is to get a complete corridor, we've got to double track it. So to get to the big 5 moves, there's even more to add than this. So the big 5 moves takes us to double track the whole corridor. So we don't have Del Mar double track in this. We don't have the double track from San Onofre Power Station up to the border. So there's 2 projects that aren't included in here.
I think the big piece is whether or not you talk about capacity. When you look at those double track projects, those projects actually include a big state of good repair.
Yeah, especially.
And so all of those projects, actually the core of those projects are state of good repair, bridge replacement projects that at the time that you're doing the state of good repair project to replace an 80 to 100-year bridge, you would add a second track. So it's a critically important thing. So, you know, sometimes the double tracking sounds optional. It's not really optional in the sense when they're embedded in a state of good repair project over a lagoon or within the ocean area.
Yeah, so particularly you've got San Dieguito, where we've got a 100-year-old bridge there by the fairgrounds, and then you've got Bataquitas Bridge is old, and Eastbrook to Shell is an old 100-year-old bridge.
Anthony, are there any public speakers for this item? No, sir. Board member comments and questions. We'll start with Board Member Jenkins.
I want to make sure I understand slide 4. I believe you said we have about 40 miles double tracked.
Right,
And we need to get to 60? Is that the number?
that's by 2050.
But it is 60 miles?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're 60 miles from the Orange County border
To the,
to Santa Fe Depot in Garden
okay.
County.
And then on slide 43 with all those big numbers.
43, the last one, okay.
So I guess the question's probably for you, Matt. How many years out do we have covered? Like, okay, do we have fiscal 2021 covered? Do we have just 20 covered? Where are we?
Well, so when you're talking about that top 10 list, almost all of those projects are currently unfunded.
Okay, okay.
If you go down the list a little bit, actually, I can put a little bit of nuance. So the two new train sets I'm going to discuss as part of my executive director's
Right.
update. The Delmar Bluffs, as he mentioned, we received the first year of funding within the state budget, subject to annual appropriations. We hope to get the full dollar amount. And then some of the State of Good Repair Bridge projects are going to be projects that NCTD will have to fund one by one within our capital improvement program.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Board Member Desmond.
Well, thank you. Well, actually, I was going to ask about the train sets. Is this number going across here, 99 million total? That's for 2 train sets? Is that
No,
what it is? And
That's
then
for 3. So,
That's for 3.
yeah, somebody changed my slide last night. I wasn't watching. So FY 20 to 22 is the first 2 train sets. To FY 23.
Okay, 20 to 22 is the first 2?
Yeah, and then over there, but FY 31 to 35, the infrastructure development plan calls for a 3rd train out in that period.
Oh, okay.
Because we've got, at the moment, we're running 22 coasters a day. So the plan is to be running twice that many trains by 2035. But in the interim, there's an interim step. We won't have the passengers now to run all those trains now. So that's why we're looking for 2 train sets now.
Okay, so train set's about 35 million or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that number's escalated out to FY 31, so that's why it's higher. The escalation's included in these numbers.
Mhm.
I don't like using unescalated numbers because then they're always not enough. So
What's your share of Grand Central Station?
that's in planning.
Okay.
It's not in this at all. This is just the projects that are already in the plan, in the early action plan that we've been asked to work on, plus Matt's State of Good Repair projects, which is part of replacing all the old timber bridges.
Okay. Thanks.
So yeah, no,
Board Member Edson.
Thank you, Bruce. So following up on Supervisor Desmond's question, so you're running 22 train sets now, correct? So 2 more is 24, and we would
no,
have
we run 22 trains a day.
22 trains a day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not sure how many train sets Matt's got. 4 train sets now? 4 train sets.
Thank you.
Board Member Duker.
We're still contemplating getting a platform there, correct? And I would assume this is kind of like a full-blown station or something like that, or?
Yes, we've been working with BNSF. In fact, we're actually advancing a study with BNSF towards getting this project implemented. And so we are making incremental steps, but we're going to be going for a TRCP grant to fund this project because this actually the convention center platform project provides significant improvements for freight. It adds capacity as well to support increased frequencies, and it will also improve the roadway as it will allow synchronization of signals as trains move throughout the corridor. So we are actively advancing, working on this project.
Thank you. Solana Beach, when that was built, who paid for that?
Before my time. NCTD did it back in the late 90s.
Solana Beach put some money into it. You know, obviously federal government a whole lot, but it was mostly government money, shall we say. It will, you know,
Our money coming back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think if I may add something to that. So if you look at this whole corridor, roughly a third of the money comes from Transnet, a third comes from FRA, FTA, and a third comes from the state. So for every dollar we have of Transnet, we can leverage another dollar from the state and another dollar from the federal government.
So that would be for every trenching project. I mean,
All the
Carlsbad
projects.
is
All the projects. That's just the
Yeah.
average in the whole
all the
corridor.
projects.
That's the
Okay.
average. Some might be a wholly federal or wholly state or wholly Transnet, but if you look at the average of all the money spent, it's about a third local you can use to get federal and state.
Okay.
So that's the big advantage of Transnet. It allows us to get 67 cents for 33 cents we put in.
Board Member Edson, did you have another question?
I did. I'm sorry to go back again to the number of trains and train sets. So we have 4 train sets now. We're looking for 2 more by 2022, which brings us up to 6 train sets. So a third more than we have now. Is that right?
No, we have a total of 7 train sets right now. What Eric was speaking to is the requirement for actual daily operations, and while the other trains are in the maintenance shop. So we're advancing the replacement now of 5 locomotives. And then we have 2 additional locomotives that we need to replace. And we've said that we can offer improved service frequencies once we have the new equipment. But to go to the 30-minute headways that we've discussed, we will need the 2 additional train sets to be able to do that.
And double tracking as well?
Well, once Sandak completes the current double track projects, it will be more than 700 and something million expended. We will then be able to operate. So they will have completed the capital construction ahead of us receiving the equipment to operate the 30-minute headway.
Okay, and so what year are you targeting for that 30-minute headway at this
Well,
point?
remember, as part of the 5-year budget, we said we would implement it between the 2020 to 2024 timeframe. And so that's why, it's important for us that we get a firm commitment from Sandag within the next couple of months on the 2 train sets, because we're right now in a procurement process that if we can get a firm commitment from Sandag and allocation of those dollars, we'll be able to negotiate the best price and the best schedule to get those train sets within the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, and are those 30-minute headways just at peak, or is that all day? And if it is all day, how many hours are in that day?
Yes.
Looking at me?
Yeah.
30 minutes in the morning for like 2 hours, between 6 and 8 a.m. roughly, in both directions. And then 30 minutes in the afternoons, from like 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. in both directions. Hour frequencies in between the 2 time periods. And then a little bit of hour service after the rush hour in the evening, so like 7 to 8 p.m.
And remember,
22 trains a day to 42 trains a day.
and remember that eliminates those 3-hour blocks that we have where there's no train that is available.
Thank you.
Board Member Desmond.
Sorry, keep coming back to this. So we have 7 train sets now,
Yes.
and we're operating essentially 4.
Yes.
Okay, and you're gonna get 2 more to make 9.
To bring it to 9.
But are all 9 of those gonna be operable, or some of these gonna be phased out?
No. So what you have to understand, those trains have to go in for maintenance.
Yeah.
And so within the whole maintenance cycles of these trains, you're not going to have 9 vehicles in revenue service this
I
day.
guess what I'm trying to figure out, once you get to your whatever 30-minute headway and all that, how many train sets do you need?
We will have 9 train sets.
So they're all going to so you're replacing engines, and you're also trying to get new train sets.
Exactly. So we're replacing the 7 that we have,
Yeah.
and we're adding 2 new sets.
When do the new 7 come, or I guess when do the new engines start coming?
August of next year.
Next year. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, comments? I would like to comment that Mr. Bruce Smith and I got to spend a lot of time together over the last couple of years with all the construction being conducted in Cardiff. And I really admire the work that you did and your team. and it went about as well as it can. We did a lot in a short period, short span of our tracks, and I thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Tony. And I'd also like to thank Encinitas because it's the first time I've worked on a project where we've had active participation from elected officials. And it really, in the coordination of a big project like the North Coast, where we've got railway, freeway, we did a quiet zone, it's really important to have that communication between the people doing the project and the community. And it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. That takes us to the executive director's report, and you'll notice in your folder that you have a written executive director's report because there's a lot of information. None of these items have been agendized, so it's going to be a one-way informational thing here, maybe small questions to clarify as necessary, but no deliberations about any of these items.
And to move through this in a timely manner. A lot of this is just to give you all a heads up of what's coming down the line. So first, I just want to mention the Strategic Multimodal Transit Implementation Plan. That project is kicking off. This is one of the more significant studies for NCTD in terms of determining the types of services that we're going to provide in the future. It's going to build upon our land use study that you have received presentations in the past. What I'm going to ask Anthony to do is to send out to you all the scope of work and the consultant proposal so that you can have an opportunity to look at the details of what's included. I've received a lot of feedback from some cities relative to things like microtransit and different types of services. You're going to see that this study contemplates evaluating all of those different types of service alternatives. And one of the things that we want to do is to be patient and let the study go through its course before we jump ahead and start making significant changes to the system. Coaster expansion train sets. I think we just talked about this item, but I will share that I had a conversation with Hassan, and it looks as if Sandag is planning to come to their board at the September 13th meeting to request approval for funding. And so we want to make sure that we have a broad coalition of support. This board approved the letter back in April expressing support and requesting that Sandag identify the funding for those 2 new train sets. Carlsbad Connector Service. This has been a very good news service, good news about what we've been doing with the city of Carlsbad and Sandag. This is going to give the district a lot of information to see how we change our business model and platform, what kind of ridership it's going to yield. It's significantly important from a NCTD focused perspective for first and last mile services in the operating environment that we have, where it is difficult to draw a fixed route line. This will give people more of a concierge type of services. So we've laid out with a little bit of detail in terms of some of the key project milestones, but it's been a very good partnership. And hopefully we can use this model with other cities to implement these types of services. Mobility on Demand grant. Just wanted to give you guys a heads up that we are working in collaboration with Metrolink and Losan to develop a grant application that would support the procurement of an integrated traveler application. And what that would do would be to leverage kind of all of the resources that we bring collectively to support the rail operations more as a federated network so that the customers can have a seamless riding experience. What our intention is to integrate traveler information, payment information, and first and last mile solutions in one traveler app. And it's going to be primarily focused towards commuters so that when you wake up in the morning, this technology would understand your typical commute patterns and let you know exactly, for example, how congested that road is today and give you some options. So this is a good news story that we're collaborating on this as well as fare integration. The next thing is we're just going to mention the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program grant application period. That's going to be a significant item for the district because a lot of the projects that Bruce identified on the top 10 list are going to be projects that we put forward in terms of seeking funding for through the state cap and trade program. So this is a significant thing for which we're going to spend the next few months as staff working with consultants to develop strong grant applications. If you recall, last year, we received a grant for about $65 million as a performance incentive and maintenance grant that actually makes a big deal difference to the district, having $4.5 million plus per year coming into our coffers. Oceanside Transit Center, transit-oriented development project. This is more of a heads up that we're beginning that process. We've been working closely with the city, and we have a developers workshop on August 21, 2019. This process is a precursor to us advancing a procurement for development at that site. And I'm also pleased to share the news that we received a certificate of recognition from Senator Bates' office for support for our support of small business development centers, meet the buyers and local small business initiatives. A copy of it is in your folders. I want to thank Bradley Saran, our civil rights officer, for his consistent hard work and dedication to ensuring the success of NCTD's small and disadvantaged business program. Is Bradley in here? Come on up, Bradley. Come up so we can see you. So this is Bradley. He's one of our great employees that works at the district. He works hard every single day to make sure that we're going the extra mile in terms of meeting compliance with all of our responsibilities. So thank you, Bradley, for your great work. And then finally, as we go off to, or as you all go off to summer recess, we always try to make the offer. We're always available, but typically, historically, we've tried to work with board members to the degree that board members want to sit down and talk with me or Lori or us together. It's actually a really good time because it's pretty, most of the month is dark in terms of August for meetings. So please let us know if there are any items that you would like to discuss, and we'd be more than happy to and willing to come out and meet you anywhere to have some discussions. That completes my report.
Thank you. And for board member reports, I will report that I attended a SANDAG meeting recently that had a great conversation about the 5 big moves that Mr. Smith mentioned, and I'm sure you've read about. As part of that presentation, they used some big data to show transit patterns in the 78 corridor. And so one of the things that I think NCTD should be doing is looking towards the program that we're rolling out in Carlsbad and really aggressively see if there's a way to implement something similar in the other cities in the 78 corridor. So my hope is we can take a look at that. I also mentioned that with the big data that's being crunched down there at SANDAG, it seems like they're taking a lot of responsibility on the modeling and such. And I wonder if some of what they're doing might be something that NCTD could, if not help with, at least get informed about what's being done. Because I think in the end, the data that they're gathering and the work that they're doing with commutes, I think would be very useful for informing the board and decisions that we make. So are there any other board member comments? Mac.
I just want to ask, probably this is for you, Matt, a quick question. On the use of the sheriff at the transit centers, what do they do there again when you... Because we're getting a lot of, the council members are getting a lot of complaints because it's scaring off the customers, that it looks like they're looking for an escaped prisoner or it's immigration or something. And as you know, we have one of the highest riderships of the buses. So I was just wondering, what are they doing there?
Well, they provide general law enforcement support for the district throughout our system.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever falls under general law enforcement services, that's what they provide at our system. Just to give you a tangible example of why they would be at bus facilities, other than the obvious of you have people coming in and out of those facilities. They are also there because they also interface with our operators, our bus operators. So For example, from time to time, you'll see a page out that has an unruly passenger on a bus. And the sheriff's department may meet that bus operator right at that facility to address that situation. Or from time to time, we have issues actually on site at the facility, and the sheriff department works to address those issues.
You don't have control over them, do you, Matt?
No, I don't.
You have liaison with them?
We have a contract with them. Sean, our chief of safety and security, manages contract. I meet with them on a quarterly basis, and we review what's going on with them. I would tell you, I've been very pleased with the work efforts that they have put forward to help make sure we have a safe system.
Well, I have some pictures that I'd like to forward to you, and maybe you could take a look at them. We can have an offline discussion
Sounds good.
about it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Edson.
Thank you. So this is addressed to Board Member McNamara, Mayor McNamara. We face similar concerns, not just at the train station, but elsewhere with our sheriff's presence in our city. And we think that our sheriffs do a really terrific job. But as you said, in the current political climate, there's some fear, especially with regard to enforcement of immigration. So we actually invited the sheriff to come speak at our council meeting to reassure the public about what their role is and the fact that, and they were very forthright about the fact that they will not enforce immigration. But it was really good to hear it from the horse's mouth. And so we have also invited them to speak to some community groups that have membership with those same specific concerns. And I think it's really gone a long way into creating trust.
Okay. And I think, it may be worth talking about these issues offline. This is board member reports, so we got to kind of stay out of trouble with regard to Brown Act and agenda items and such. So,
Right. I mean, we don't get the reports on our own police department, but we do get this feedback from the sheriffs. That's why I'm kind of bringing it up.
yeah, and I appreciate it. And I think that it's an important issue to take up with the executive director. So please do. Any other board member comments? Vice Chair Feller.
So I think your concern about enforcement is Oceanside does enforce around the transit center. We're well aware of that. But what I wanted to talk about was I made a comment regarding more enforcement on trespassing. And it isn't about the tickets. It's about the fatalities, the public safety. And that costs us a heck of a lot more than we're going to gain from what the tickets. So that's my point. If we enforce more on that, it's something that I think should be considered, because it might save one of these or two or 10 or whatever the lives of people trespassing. So.
Board Member Desmond.
Thank you. This is, I guess, for Mr. Tucker. The coaster expansion train sets, you'd mentioned, I guess, September 13th at a Sandag meeting, we, I guess, potentially asking for more money. $58 million is what it looks like. Was there any indication of where this money was coming out of, or if there's a pot or anything like that?
No, I just want the money.
Just fine.
It's just surprising how I find out things about Sandag when I'm not there. But anyway, okay, thank you.
Board Member Edson.
Yes, I attended Sandag board meeting on Monday, but I have nothing to report because Bruce was here and Losan, and Bruce was here and gave us this big long Losan report. So he stole my thunder. Just saying.
Any other comments? All right, we are going to close tonight's meeting with a comment from the public. Matt, 3 minutes.
Yes, hello. It's my first meeting being in the bunker. Really good meeting. I know all the elected officials have like really busy schedules and a lot of their meetings and a lot of their hats that you guys wear. I can't ask you to get engineering degrees, learn about servers or computers or anything like that. But I think one thing that is fair is to ask you to one day, just one day, and during rush hour, to one day a month, ride the transit system during rush hour. You can sort of pick that day whenever it's convenient for you. Have fun with it. Go with a colleague. Go with friends. Blog it. Post it. Go live. Meet your constituents. I recently went on the Sprinter for the first time in years, and I think there's a lot of things you're going to discover about just using the transit system. The reports are great. I read through the 81-page report about the performance and when it's on time and all that. But there's a lot of like visceral stuff just about a city and the transportation network that you're going to sort of experience sort of best actually going out there during rush hour. I mean, it's great that you do go during Sunday at convenience, and it's a little different experience. So I would ask that all of the board members voluntarily, on your own schedule, have fun with it, but ride the public transit during rush hour. Thank you.
I appreciate your comment, and I do believe we have a regular transit rider on our board, don't we?
3 times a week, I take the coaster down to
Very good.
downtown San Diego
Very good.
during rush hour
Very good.
and after.
Very
rush.
good. Take everyone else with you.
Yeah. Okay.
No comment.
Any other public comment, Anthony? No, sir. So the next scheduled meetings are the PAF committee meeting on September 19th at 12. And we have a special board meeting on September 19th at 1:30 p.m. and our regular board meeting on September 19th at 2. And with that, enjoy the rest of your summer. This meeting is adjourned.